When COVID kicked off just over a year ago now, I was at the end of a 3-year film studies course at university, and the last few weeks of it were kind of cancelled, and we had to finish all the work we had left at home, including my dissertation, including some modules, and so that was really challenging to get through. However, a week after my final deadline, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition came out.
Xenoblade Chronicles is a game that I have a long history with, and one that means a lot to me. It originally released on the Nintendo Wii back in 2010, and I'd heard about it since then, but I was pretty disinterested in it. A few years later, in 2014, the protagonist of Xenoblade got added to another video game that I played as a crossover. As a result, the character became quite famous, especially his personality, and because of this crossover I got more interested in the game he was initially from. After 8 years, in 2018, I finally got the original and I played through it, and it is one of my favourite narrative experiences that I've ever had. It took me a very long time to beat it, almost a year, but I really loved it. And just before I originally beat it, it was announced that the game would be receiving a re-release the next year on the Nintendo Switch. And this re-release is what we call a remaster, where the game was overhauled and improved in many areas, visually, gameplay-wise. The soundtrack was remixed. It was Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, the definitive version of the original game.
And I was so excited for it, I bought a massive collector's edition.
So a lot of my time leading up to the release was spent finishing off work and that process, while also being at the same time incredibly excited for when this re-release comes out. Let's talk about the game first. Xenoblade Chronicles takes place in a fantasy world where everyone lives on the bodies of 2 dead titans. Biological life forms live on one, and mechanical life forms live on another, and these 2 factions are engaged in a war. The protagonist, Shulk, and his friends are sent on an adventure from one titan to another when his hometown is attacked by the mechanical life forms. He quickly acquires a magical sword that allows him to see the future, and they use this ability to help them through. The thing that stands out to me most about Xenoblade is absolutely the narrative and the characters. The main cast of characters are all incredibly likeable, they're all brilliantly written, expertly performed, and the roughly 80-hour epic narrative is very well paced and interesting and consistently engaging. Out of all the characters, Shulk definitely stands out to me. I think he is my favourite character in all of fiction. He's likeable, charismatic, smart, he's very capable and proficient, but his character flaws are very relatable, and his voice actor gives one of the best vocal performances I've ever heard. There's actually quite an interesting story about the voice acting. Most English voice acting in video games is done in America, and as a result characters would usually have American accents. However, when Xenoblade Chronicles was being localised, the American voice acting team didn't think the game would be successful enough to warrant a localisation, and they didn't want to fund it. However, the European voice acting team disagreed, and they chose to fund it instead, and as a result had full creative control and hired a full British cast with a lot of diverse accents between the characters.
How dare you, you clown!
Watch out!
Get off me! To you!
Right in the... Take this, furball!
This is no ordinary chill.
As I explained before, Dunban, the defense systems are designed to prevent uninvited...
Well, what does this do?
Don't touch!
It's a very small thing, but it gives the game a lot of extra charm because of how unique it is. Continuing on the topic of sound, the soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles is legendary within the video game music discourse. Multiple composers worked on the soundtrack, and it's incredible. It's what you'll be hearing throughout this film. Visually, while the original hasn't aged very well, obviously, in terms of textures and polygons, the art design completely carries it. The Definitive Edition improved the technical parts, but retained the strengths of the art design. In terms of gameplay, being a remaster, the Definitive Edition didn't change that much, it just made the whole experience smoother and nicer to play. Most of the game is spent fighting enemies in combat, or just traversing the environment and the world in general. The combat is very engaging because it's quite a unique system. You only control one character at any given time, but up to 3 people fight in combat on your side, and combat's about seeing what the other character is doing, timing your abilities to synergize with each other. It's very complicated but very, very engaging, and traversing the environment is so much fun just because of how well done the world design is of these titans that you're on. You can look up at any time and see the other titan above you silhouetted in the sky. And everything, the gameplay and the world design, the voice acting, the character writing, the narrative, it all pushes forward throughout the entire 80 hours, and the ending has a grand scale and it's climactic and satisfying. And all of this was true in the original, and the definitive edition did it even better.
I beat the game in 2 weeks, and then after I did, I just kind of sat on the main menu theme and listened to the theme music. And up until now, no piece of media had ever made me properly cry. Until now, I did. I cried just listening to the theme music again and thinking about the entire playthrough. Not out of sadness or anything, but just because all the waiting for it to come out and the playing and the 2 weeks playing through it, all of that was over, and it was almost exactly how I wanted it.
Whatever happens, we'll face our future together.